Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Mum Show. Coming up on today's show, we're going to be talking about establishing healthy habits in your home. So get comfortable, grab a cup of tea and let's start the show. Hello and welcome back to The Mum Show. I'm sat in the kitchen today with play therapist Emma Brown and Pastor Clare Hooper.
Hello.
And today we're going to be exploring how to cultivate good habits, good practices in our home. Do we need to put some tighter regimes in, or is it something we can just relax and chill out and not worry too much about?
Oh, it's so subjective, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Absolutely. When you
put
do
it
it
like
from
that. Well, I think it's all to do with kind of personal preference as well, isn't
Yeah.
it? And you know, again, it's kind of like things that we habits and I guess cultures that we're used to from our family of origin and what we bring to the table when we create a new family culture. But I think, you know, when we're talking about habits, does that mean kind of like just patterns? Do you think it means kind of patterns of behaving and relating to each other within the family home?
Could be all of that, couldn't it? Could be like a pattern of beliefs, behaviours, approaches, actual physical things that you do.
Yeah.
It ranges through quite a lot, but it's important to think about all of those habits and why you do them. Otherwise, you just do them.
Yeah.
You just do them unconsciously, don't you?
I think isn't that how we define a habit then? Something that we do without thinking, without paying attention, without kind of being present with it. You know, the habits that, you know, I used to suck my thumb when I was little. I did it till I was 18 actually, but it was, you know, it was an unconscious thing.
Yeah,
it was
totally.
something that I just learned to do to kind of self-soothe, I guess.
Yeah.
Other people have other habits.
They do. Have you got any bad habits?
Bad habits?
Yeah.
Oh, there's loads.
No, never. Bad habits. Oversleeping.
Really?
Oversleeping. I mean, I'm constantly flying out the house. My kids are amazing at making breakfast in the morning. So I'm just like, guys, quickly. And actually, I think that I do think it's good to be able to sleep when you need to sleep.
Yeah.
I'm quite relaxed about that, actually. I'm not one of these people that's quite military in the mornings or anything like that. But it isn't healthy if it means that me oversleeping gets the children off to a bad start to the day, or if it means that I'm rushing and putting pressure on them because we haven't allowed enough time. So I think it's not necessarily that we need to say, you need to do X, Y, and Z, but I think it's looking at things and saying, what behaviours are negatively impacting the family, or in particular the children, and how do we establish and change those so that we intentionally create a better environment for everybody to live and thrive.
We're happy to do that in so many other areas of our life, to improve and self-improve. You know, if you're in a work setting, you want to, I suppose, reduce the amount of time it takes you to do things, or get better at something, or then, you know, make things better in this area. But sometimes I find in your family life, you can just go a little bit onto autopilot. Have you ever found that? Where you do that thing and then before you know it, you've gone to bed and you've not actually fixed the habit or thought about it or forecasted the impact it might have.
I just think so much of our lives are spent on automatic pilot, aren't they? Before we know it, these patterns of kind of relationships, but also of behaviours, of thinking, of ways of being, they just become the norm. They become, and it's not until sometimes that actually we see the negative impact that we realise, oh, hang on a minute, maybe that needs to change. It's only when those things come to light, I guess, that we kind of have to then take stock and think, how can we change this? And habits, because of the nature of them, aren't always easy to break either, because that's the nature of habits. They become automatic. They're often very kind of comfortable. It's kind of getting into a comfort zone where we don't need to think. Often a bit of a distraction as well.
I agree with you. I think when we come to our families, we're so unique and we're so individual, and my family do things differently to most of the families in the UK because we home educate.
Yeah.
So my routine is not going to look anything like most of the people's. Me and my husband both work together. We do things in a far different way of doing life. So I don't think we can actually imprint a habit. I don't believe in schedules that people need to follow. I think you've got to figure out what works well for your family. I've got a sister who she amazes me because she will eat dinner and breakfast and lunch and go to bed at the same time.
Wow.
Do you know she is the healthiest person I have ever met because, you know, she's just like, that works for their family. It really works for them. Well, in my family, that wouldn't work because we're far more creative and far more spontaneous and we want to kind of have a little bit of excitement and adventure. So I don't think that it is about trying to fit into somebody else's programme, which is a pressure on a lot of mums.
Oh, a lot, huge.
And I wouldn't want to send that message that we're like, you know, you have to do that.
Although I would say structure for any children
absolutely.
is really important. I guess it's structure with flexibility and it's being intentional about that flexibility rather than just allowing the chaos to ensue, which can tip into more unhealthy habits.
But how you hang that structure is really unique to a family, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because I will always have certain structures that fit in place, certain things that you would do, a certain time of having dinner, not specific time, and certain patterns of behaviour and things like that. But it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think there's been loads of pressure on mums. Especially when you have a new baby, to say, right, your child needs to eat every 4 hours, they need to sleep all this, they need to do that. I would say I was a victim of an oppressive regime when I first gave birth. The happiest time of my life was throwing away that routine and saying, let's figure out what's going to work well for this family. And I just think it's about being intentional about watching and seeing what behaviours create.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're in I suppose, especially with my kids, we're in a little bit of the other end of what habits we need to form. 2 of my children, my oldest 2, are taking key exams this year. And we're trying to help create structures and habits to now help them do the best that they can. But it's actually for a short burst of time. So maybe they haven't been studying every day, but now they're having to. So I've had to adjust so many of our family habits, what time they go to bed, the fact that I'm trying to help getting them to school. I wouldn't have normally done that, but I'm trying to give them as much sleep so that I can stretch out their study time and then be a part of things, prepare food at different times to fit in with it and make sure they get to the activities. So actually it's been really I found it quite a challenge to really think intentionally about changing habits for that period of time. You don't realise how, I do want to eat my tea at that time. Your body just gets hungry, and now we can. And you know, it's interesting to watch the ebbs and flows of that.
But that's the, I guess, the benefit of being able to be flexible. And to be intentional and to be observational as well, kind of really tuning into your kids and knowing, this is the way we've done life for this length of time, and it's kind of worked, but actually I'm not sure that's really going to work for this period of time, and seeing where the changes need to happen. But it's having that flexibility, because
that's key.
It is. It really is. It's we kind of think sometimes about kind of the way that we tend to do life is either in a very rigid kind of holding tight control to the schedule, holding tight control to life, and often that's driven by anxiety. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's the kind of the chaos where it can feel very overwhelming, and somehow, you know, finding that middle ground of kind of being flexible and integrating those 2 parts can be really helpful, but it's not always easy, is it?
And then your life can sometimes just feel full of things that you have to do habitually and no space for just creativity, space to be spontaneous and space to find things, you know. And then you go, okay, I've got to go to work, that's a daily habit I have to do. I've got to eat my breakfast, that's a daily habit I have to do. I've got to get the kids from here. And then you're like, well, where do I leave time to spend time with the people that I love and habitually spend time with God and go to church and being involved in church activities? And then there's an activity that I want to volunteer at. Creating all that space that become good habits, and everybody tells you all these things are good habits. They're good for you. It's good for you. You should do this. It's good for you. You should do that. Wow! You know, before you know it,
and that's actually my bad habit, because I overcommit, and I overcommit to things, and I find it really difficult to say no to things. And I feel very easily overwhelmed, and that then kind of makes me then feel very guilty that I've not spent as much quality time as I should do with my children. And I'm constantly trying to change that habit of mine and think and have put those boundaries in place for myself. But it's, you know, it feels like sometimes these habits, they're intentional. intentional, and it's really good that we can be aware of them, but it doesn't mean to say that it's easy to change.
Absolutely.
If I'm honest, there's been times when I've literally had a little tick list in my head. Remember to kiss husband, tick. Remember to feed the children, tick. Toilet rolls in the house, tick.
Yeah.
Oh, go me. All those things, just because you so feel it. And I think I would be a bit like you. Overcommitting would have been my more bigger battle, rather than just space to habitually be creative and create good habits of healthy, disciplines of prayer and worship and time with God, and those things that fill your heart with creativity.
Those things that anchor you and make you feel. I mean, there's known attributes, aren't there, that help us to feel anchored and centred as humans, and then there are those elements that represent dysfunction, aren't there?
What, within families, you mean?
Yeah, within families, so that, they always say, I can't remember all of them now, you'll probably be able to help me, but they say, like, everybody needs, some time alone.
I think there would be warning signs, I think, if you start to notice. So if you start to notice that your family, there's a lot of secrets, potentially a lot of secrets around, or people kind of keeping things, oh, don't tell your dad that because he might get upset.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting how kind of sometimes harmless those things can start off by being, and soon with it, before we realise it, they've become a cultural norm within a family. So it's things like, having lots of secrets, lots of kind of denial and avoidance of things. So kind of, again, avoiding dealing with the difficult conversations, avoiding dealing with resolving conflict in the right way. That can actually very easily become a habit and a learnt behaviour, and this is the way that we do this, because actually to actually deal with things can sometimes feel too tricky. And there's, we've talked about it already, haven't we? The idea of lacking that quality time. That for me is a big red flag. I know that when I kind of sit back and think, do you know what, the four of us haven't done life together properly for a little while, apart from having, maybe a few evening meals together. We've not actually spent a whole day together for ages, and it's starting to feel that everybody's kind of going off into their own spaces within the house, and we need to reconnect. So, but that takes me kind of noticing that, and sometimes it's about kind of, right, okay, we've got to prioritise this quality time. I also think things like, if one person is struggling in a particular area with addiction, or with something, with kind of mental health difficulties, or even kind of anger or control issues, that can soon become quite habitual within a family structure. And these are all signs for us to look out for about, is there real dysfunction within the way we're doing family at the moment, and try and do something different.
I've read somewhere that there's a period of time at which it takes to break a habit or make a habit. So when you do something over and over again, which is why sometimes people go, oh, I've tried to change it, but it just doesn't change. I've tried to do that. And it takes, to change a habit or to bring a new habit in, can take a good period of time, can't it? I mean,
it's meant to be 21 days.
I'd heard that, I'd read the equivalent of 3 weeks to make or break a habit. And it's interesting to note that, when you're doing sleep training with your children, how it takes, you can't just give up on night one. You've got to really be proactive, and it's like so hard, because it would be so much easier just to do it this way or go back to the way it was. But it's the long-term gain. So I sometimes watch other families and I go, I love the way you do that. How can I accommodate for that in my family? There's just sometimes you see it and you're like, that is just brilliant the way you do that. And it's just taking those...
It takes a lot of perseverance.
A lot of perseverance,
because it is a busy age where everybody's so busy, there's so much pressure on us to do everything all at once, that actually to kind of, no, we're going to commit to this. This is a change that we all need to sign up to, and we're all going to commit to it. And it's not going to change overnight. Kind of really recognising that proper change. I mean, it's sometimes these habits that we get into are created over years. Things aren't going to change, within a week, after years of
and I think you need teamwork in the family.
Definitely.
And you need everyone to recognise that and to be all on the same side. Do you know how long it took me to get my boy to sleep in his own bed? 8 weeks. 8 weeks. Now, my daughter she stayed in her own bed really easily, like straight away, but she was up and out all the time. He became a perfect sleeper after 8 weeks. Right. But the difference was that you would put him to bed and then he would wake up every kind of 3 hours. and he would wake up all through the night, and I didn't want to leave him to cry it out, and I didn't want to just lock the door on him. But I really didn't want him to go any longer in bed with me. I wanted him to be in his own room and to be comfortable in his own room. And I just felt that that was the right thing for us to do. I think he was about 20 months at the time. And I was like, this is it for me now. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I was exhausted.
Yeah,
I was exhausted because I used to kneel down next to his bed and just be there, and he'd just have my hands and he'd cuddle my hands, and then, just slowly just take it away, and then couple of weeks I'd just be sat next to him, and then I'd just be sat next to the door, and it went on for 8 weeks, and I worked it out, and I was like, I have had barely any sleep. Barely any sleep. But that one, for me, I committed better to him sleeping than I did to Lilia, because she was older, because we'd moved countries, we'd moved house, and honestly, we have had so many more problems with Lilia getting to sleep than we have with Ruben, who sleeps perfectly, 12 and a half hours every night.
Do you think it's because of the strategy that you use and the perseverance?
Yeah, I think it's because when it was Lilia, there were other things going on. And I heard a lady, she wrote about education a long, long time ago. I think it was about 100 years ago, Charlotte Mason. And she says that when there's a habit that needs to change, that when you need to adopt a healthy habit, move everything out the way for a minute and then work on that habit. Allow that to become a team focus for your family. And I found that with Lilia, we hadn't done that because we were moving house, she was moving into a new bedroom. At some point we were at my parents' house for a while, we'd moved countries. And actually it was like, I need you to be in your new bed because there's no space for you to crash in our bedroom. She'd been in her own bed in Spain, but this was a different situation. And so that was just, we tried to deal with everything, including her sleeping. Whereas with Ruben, it was just like, okay, everybody, and my husband, she's out of it, I'll cook dinner.
So I guess what you're saying is, if you do recognise that you decide that something needs to change, or that the right time to kind of either instill a healthy habit or try and get rid of an unhealthy habit, you've got to all work as a team and agree together that this is what you're going to do. And I guess you've also got to kind of give yourselves that space and time to commit to it, and really just kind of clear the decks, I guess, and focus on it. It's a bit like when you start potty training, isn't it, with toilet training your children. Kind of, I remember booking a week off work specifically just to go, right, everything else is
clear
secondary.
The decks, exactly, clear the decks, this is important.
I love when you look in the Old Testament and you see the way that Moses has to parent the children of Israel. And they've gone from such a place of chaos and no identity, and they weren't formed at all, to all of a sudden having to become a nation, having to become a family, having to work together in such an extreme environment. And I always find it really interesting that, first of all, he goes through so many turbulent times, and he gets angry and he chucks the 10 Commandments on the floor, and all sorts of chaos ensues, and they always treat him like they don't know who he is, which I don't understand. They're like, oh, where's this Moses gone? Oh, we don't know, he's gone up a mountain. Oh, we'll just make a golden calf, and it's all just, just so chaotic, and you're like, oh my goodness. But in that time, they really focus on putting structure, and God gives them the 10 Commandments, and a lot of structure and ritual and understanding is built around that, and they have to really form solid. But if you whiz through the Bible, actually, when Jesus is here and the church and God's people become more mature, that starts to lift, and actually people are more internally governed. And I sometimes think as parents, you were saying about the rigidity and the chaos, and we've got to find that middle way. It's actually staying really close to saying, okay, where is my family at the moment? Definitely. And how do I need to respond to that? Because it's going to keep changing, isn't it?
Always.
It will do, yeah, absolutely.
Shall we have a listen to the kids?
Yes.
Right, let's see what the children think about establishing good habits.
And action! I think a habit is something that we do every day. So brushing our teeth is a habit. Not making our bed is a habit.
In my family, some good habits are finishing dinner, being polite, and using your cutlery properly.
Do you think that like a tradition can be a habit?
A nice thing about my family is when nearly every Saturday my dad takes me to a football match, and that's really kind of him because he's instead like taking time with the families, he's actually putting his time to watch my football matches.
And are there any things that you do in your family that really sets your family apart?
In the Hammer House, we like to have breakfast all together, and we try to be more kinder to each other and not fight and hit each other in the face with frying pans.
Me and my mum always have breakfast together. When I'm at my dad's, I try to not wake him up early and try to let him sleep in because he's got a very hard job.
Do you think there are any habits in your house that would be good to change?
One thing that I could change is making my bed and trying not to wake my mum up 4 o'clock in the morning.
Going to bed on time, and one thing I think my mum and dad could probably change is before like my mum does turning into Incredible Hulk, I think she could say please first and then give us a warning if we don't listen to her.
Only one more habit that I could change, this one from my dad, I could change his snoring because he snores so loudly I don't get to bed till 9. Because he naps downstairs and all I hear is that's all I hear.
That is awesome. So have you guys ever had to change a habit or stop a habit? Can you think of a time? And if you can you tell me about that and what it was like and what it felt like to change?
A change of behaviour that happened with me and Jules is one night Jules kept on, she came into my bed and my mum and dad had to keep on coming up and giving us fines. It's sort of stopped now, so Jules hardly ever comes into my bed anymore, and she only comes in on weekend nights, not on school nights.
What did it feel like to have to change that? Was it difficult?
A little bit difficult because Jules got sometimes really bad dreams. I found it difficult because I didn't want Jules to get really scared, and because if she did, then I don't want her crying in the morning, and then sometimes she'll late for school because she gets really upset about it.
If there was something in your family, the way that your family behaved together, if you were going to change anything, what would you change?
When I wake my mum up early and I slap her in the face with the pillow, and when I just go downstairs and I chill with the puppies and play on my iPad. I think I could change that. I'd probably just play with the puppies instead.
Aww,
Amazing.
they're so cute, aren't they? Do you know what I think is quite interesting there is that the habits seem to be places of empowerment within the family. Because I like the fact that he said, I can probably, I let my dad sleep in a bit longer because he's got a busy job and he probably needs it. And sometimes we think about habits as things that need to work for us, but do you think they empower kids as well, would you say?
Having healthy habits.
Having healthy habits, yeah.
Absolutely. It kind of, I guess it helps, you know, any sort of kind of structure or routine we know helps children, we know it's healthy for them. But I guess what he's talking about is much more than that. He's talking about kind of having an internal sense of empathy and compassion for his dad, who he recognises has a busy job and really appreciates sleeping in. But he probably has also worked out that if he does that, then dad's going to wake up probably in a bit more of a refreshed and better mood. And, you know, they're all winners, aren't they? And family life, I guess, functions a lot better. Yeah. And he's probably learnt that.
Yeah, but it's nice for him, isn't it, to be able to say, oh, this is something I can do that improves my family life.
Absolutely.
And I think it's the same with giving your kids jobs to do, or, you know, it's something to say that by participating in this habit,
definitely,
you can help contribute to a happier home.
It's part of the hierarchy of needs again we've talked about before. You know, your basic needs are met, and as you go up to the top, it's the self-actualisation of being able to contribute back into the world that you live in.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think for children to feel a part of that, and to feel that they can contribute and have a purpose within the family structure, and maybe have, you know, kind of have a say in terms of what habits they want to do less of, and what habits they want to do more of. We've talked a little bit more about family group meetings, and that's a really ideal opportunity for families to come together and think about what's working well, what are we doing good, guys? Come on, let's all write down our thoughts or share our thoughts. And then actually, what are the bad habits? What are the things that we've noticed that we kind of need to tweak and change a little bit? So important to involve the children and have their voices in that.
Absolutely.
The natural and the spiritual join up really well in this. You know, this is a very natural product. It's about our daily habits, our daily life, our daily disciplines. But that is so God. You know, every day the sun rises and the sun goes down. Every day these things happen for a reason. Our body works in a certain way. The seasons come in a certain way. It's just, that is the motion of being a human being. I think we have to accept that that is a godly, like, it's part of God's nature and who we are. But also it's really important to factor in those daily disciplines and the daily habits that are the godly ones that can only be done by connecting with your Father. Timothy says this: exercise daily in God. No spiritual flabbiness, please. Workouts in the gymnasium are useful, but a disciplined life in God is far more so, making you fit both for today and forever. So you're working your muscles in the natural, but it's best that you work those things in the spiritual and habits that form in that way. Yeah. A couple of years ago, we got a dog. We noticed that it was a really tense time when he first arrived. We were really happy, but we realised a habit that we had as a family was talking over each other, and the dog mirrored that to us. He was excited and jumping about all the time, and we were like, oh, we hadn't realised that we'd been doing that to each other for so long. And so changing that habit totally changed the peace in our house, which allowed more space for us to have other things. It's just ongoing, isn't it? Natural and supernatural at the same time.
I love what you were saying as well, because God is a God of process, isn't he? He created the world in 7 days. Everything is a process, and as a family, we need to kind of figure out how we fit around that, because that's the result. It's peace, isn't it?
Absolutely. And God intended for us to have life in all its fullness.
Absolutely.
And I think that goes for, you know, how choosing and being intentional about creating a healthier way of doing life with each other and with our family. There's a kind of few things that we talked earlier about, the kind of the signs to look out for dysfunction, but I guess some of the things that I've thought about that are really important for having a healthy family culture is allowing that free expression of emotion. But where conflict isn't shied away from or avoided, but it's addressed and it's dealt with and it's used as a way of kind of having those deeper connections with each other. It's about establishing healthy boundaries. It's about having, like we've said before, that flexible structure, that kind of middle ground way of being able to kind of, have the structure but be flexible enough when it needs to change. And also that openness and encouragement that we have with each other. One of the things that I've been reading recently is, I know we've talked a little bit about Brené Brown before, haven't we? And she has written, she talks a lot about having a parenting manifesto or a family manifesto.
Such a good idea.
It's fantastic. When I read hers, it actually brought tears to my eyes because it was so kind of heartfelt. And I guess it's maybe I'm kind of challenging all of us here to kind of, and I have had a little go in preparing for this show. Actually, I had a little go at writing my own parenting manifesto, and I think the advice I would give is just don't kind of worry about what you're going to write. Just spend some time with yourself and decide what it is. What do you want for your family? What do you want the biggest key messages to pass on to your children? How do you want them to live life? And then just write it, and then you can tweak it as well. I wonder, is it worth me putting it on the website?
We'll pop that on the website. That would be really good. So if you want to head over to our website at promisecollective.co.uk, we will make sure that there is an example of a family manifesto for you to check out there. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a good rest of the day. Bye.
Hello parents, don't forget to say hello. We're at promisecollective.co.uk.